Thank you very much for making time to join us this afternoon at the 74th Bernard Prize Memorial Lecture that is done in conjunction with, with the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers and Wits University. So online, I do believe we have the Eastern Cape Center. We don't exactly have the numbers, and the KZN. So without further ado, let me hand over to Prof. Thokozani Majozi, who's the Dean of Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment here at the Wits University, to do the welcoming. Prof, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lienetse. Distinguished colleagues, esteemed members of the South African Institute of Electrical Engineering, and here I'm recognizing Mr. Pascal Motwa-Tsele and Andres Mtetwa, who I believe will be joining us later, who are the past presidents of SAIEE, and also the CEO, Mr. Lienetse Matutwane, who gave the opening remarks, fellow academics that are here from Wits and other institutions, the industry colleagues that are here. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is my distinct honor to welcome you to the 74th Bernard Prize Memorial Lecture, speaking on behalf of our Vice Chancellor, Professor Zeplon Vilakazi, who extends his warmest welcome to all present here today. Unfortunately, he had another engagement and he could not be here this evening. So we gather here to honor the legacy of Bernard Prize, whose vision and contributions to electrical engineering continue to illuminate our path forward. This memorial lecture series has become a cornerstone event that bridges the critical gap between academic excellence and industrial innovation, a bridge that has never been more vital than it is today. As Dean of Engineering and the Built Environment here at Wits University, I'm acutely aware of the transformative challenges facing our nation's energy landscape. South Africa stands at a critical moment in its energy journey, where the decisions we make today will determine not only our economic prosperity, but also our commitment to sustainable development and energy security for generations to come. The University of the Witwatersrand has always been at the forefront of engineering innovation. And our Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment continues this proud tradition. Our researchers and students are actively engaged in addressing the complex energy challenges that confront our continent, from renewable energy optimization and integration to smart grid technologies. Today, we are privileged to hear from Mr. THEMBANI BUKULA, who I know very well, whose distinguished career exemplifies the intersection of technical expertise and strategic leadership. As CEO of PowerX and chairperson of the board of the Nuclear Energy Regulator of South Africa, Mr. BUKULA brings a unique perspective that spans both the commercial and regulatory dimensions of our energy sector. His dual role positions him at the epicenter of South Africa's energy transformation. PowerX's innovative approaches to energy solutions, combined with his regulatory oversight through NERSA, provide him with an unparalleled view of the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead in our energy transition. The timing of this lecture could not be more appropriate. As we navigate the complexities of our energy security concerns and the imperative for sustainable development we need thought leaders who can articulate a clear vision for our energy future, one that balances economic viability, environmental sustainability, as well as social equity. At WITS, we believe that engineering education must evolve to meet these contemporary challenges. Our students must be equipped not only with technical competencies, but also with the systems thinking and leadership capabilities required to drive meaningful change in complex socio-technical environments. The Bernard Prize Memorial Lecture Series embodies this philosophy, bringing together the academic community with industry leaders to foster dialogue, share insight, and inspire the next generation of engineers and innovators. I encourage all of you to engage actively in today's discussion. The questions you pose, the perspectives you share, and the networks you build here today will contribute to the collective intelligence we need to address our energy challenges. On behalf of the University of the Witwatersrand and our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Zeblon Vilakazi, I extend our deepest gratitude to the South African Institute of Electrical Engineering, I nearly said Electrical and Electronic Engineering, South African Institute of Electrical Engineering, for organizing this important event. And to you, Mr. Bukula, for stepping forth to share your expertise with us today. So without any further delay, I'll hand over now to the program directors to steer us through the rest of the schedule. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Majosi. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 74th Bernard Prize Memorial Lecture, which is actually a joint meeting between the university and the SAIEE, the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers. These lectures have been happening for many, many years, so it's actually a flagship event within our calendar as the SAIEE. My name is Pascal Mutwasele. I'm the immediate past president of the institute. Our president, unfortunately, could not make it today. He's traveling on business, so I believe he's in Asia. So probably it's very late, but I really believe that actually maybe he's joining us online as we speak, Mr. Veer Ramnarine. I believe actually I was told that there's a video that he shot in terms of this particular event. So can we play that video, please?
Let me firstly start off by apologizing for not being present at this year's lecture. Unfortunately, I am currently recording this video sitting in China. I have been invited to the Energy Storage Conference, the World Energy Storage Conference, as the president of the Institute. So I am here on Institute business. In terms of the Bernard Prize Memorial Lecture, I need to give you some background for those of you that are not aware of the significance of Bernard Prize or who Dr. Bernard Prize was. I hope I get my dates right. Dr. Bernard Prize was born in England in 1887, and he then came to South Africa in 1909. And interestingly, that's the year that the Institute was formed to take up the position as a chief engineer in the Victoria Falls and Transvaal Power Company. He was then appointed as president of South African Institute of Electrical Engineers in 1915. And again, it's significant because this makes 2025 the 110-year anniversary since Dr. Bernard Prize was the president of the Institute. In 1940, he was awarded the honorary life membership of the Institute. And this lecture, the BP lecture, is actually named in memory of Dr. Bernard Prize. The first lecture was held in 1951, and ever since then it's been an annual event for which the president invites an esteemed lecturer or individual to deliver a talk at the BP lecture. Personally, I felt as the president of the Institute, we have enough engineers and reputable individuals within the country that for this year I would call upon my friends and people that I associated myself with over the years in electrical engineering. And for that, I've called on THEMBANI BUKULA to deliver the BP lecture this year. As with the presidential invitation lecture, where Dr. Nad Molly was in university with me at the then University of Natal, THEMBANI BUKULA was also at university for me. And after we both finished our studies in 1993, we both went on to work for Eskom. So THEMBANI gladly accepted the invitation today. THEMBANI, please accept my apology for not being present at the lecture today. You are left in the capable hands of the CEO, Linetse Matutuwane, and Pascal Matsuasele. Both of them will play a significant role in terms of the proceedings for today. And yes, I certainly will try to attend and listen to the lecture recording if I cannot listen to it online remotely. With that said, I would like to now end my message to you today and thank you all for your attendance to this evening's BP lecture. Good afternoon.
And thank you, Mr. President. I believe you are probably watching even now. You can't sleep. So yeah, thanks for that message. So you're not yet to listen to me. I'm going to introduce our speaker for today. Mr. Bukula holds a BSc in Electrical Engineering from the University of Natal, now called UKZN. He has a postgraduate diploma in Engineering Business Management from Warwick University, and an MSc Mathematics, Science and Technology Education from UNISA. He registered as a professional engineer in 1997, PR-Eng, and obtained his GCC for factories in 1998. Mr. Bukula is an engineer with over 30 years of experience and is currently the Chief Executive Officer of PowerX, a licensed electricity trader in South Africa. He is the chairperson of the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, NERSA. Previously, he was the regulator member primarily responsible for electricity regulation at NERSA from 2005 to 2016. Prior to this, he served as managing director at various entities, including testing and conformity services at the SABS, South African Bureau of Standards, and at BITES Managed Services. He started his career at Yeland Engineering as a design engineer and later joined M&E Design as a project engineer before joining Eskom Transmission back in 1993. So the topic for today, which is quite topical as you heard, and you can probably read on the screen, not, okay. It's the envisaged journey towards a competitive electricity trading market. Policy pathways, challenges, and prospects. Mr. Bukula, over to you, thank you.
Good evening, distinguished guests, and I would prefer to call you colleagues today because I think we're going to be discussing a matter that requires us to discuss it as colleagues. Before I start, let me thank the program director, thank Prof, as I struggle to call you Prof as you're a colleague at Natal University, but I'll call you Prof today. I won't call you the names we used to call you. I also want to thank the University of Wits for agreeing to host me, as well as the SAIEE for hosting me. When I first spoke to Veer, the topic that I was going to discuss was more aligned with what I had done at the energy regulator, as you had had my bio when it was read. And it was going to be around the pricing and all of the challenges that we have around pricing. But when we made the 54 billion rand error, I said, I can't stand in front of people and talk about that. I mean, how will they listen to me when I make such a humongous error? So we said, we'll change the topic and then we'll talk about the journey towards this competitive electricity trading market. And I must start by saying that as much as it sounds and looks like a journey that is well-planned, well-thought, as I go through the presentation, I hope I'm not going to underwhelm you by, instead of telling you how it is going to be like and what is going to happen, but instead put challenges to you, put questions back to you about the difficulties of this journey that we are required to take. So I'm going to start my presentation really by telling you what the marching orders have been from the amended Electricity Regulation Act, what it says in broad policy terms, what the policy pathways are, the challenges, the prospects, and I'll conclude. And I trust that I would do it in a manner that's efficient, that would enable us to rather have a discussion rather than just you listening to me. So the Electricity Regulation Act, as it was amended in 2024, in fact, it started on the 10th of January 2024. The biggest part of the amendment, other than the changes in licensing, the changes in who would be required to register, was that it said that as we regulate, you are going to provide an open market platform that would allow for competitive trading. How this is going to be done is we are going to establish a transmission system operator that would act as the transmitter, the system operator, the market operator, and the central purchasing agent. And all of that you are going to do has to be done in a period no longer than 5 years. We are already on year one, and year one is creating the hype. I don't know if we're going to get to year 5, but when I say we, the energy regulator is the custodian of the Electricity Regulation Act and the other acts. So we get given an act, we are told you implement. Now, what I've learned over the years of having been at the regulator is that when you are given an act, and it may look impossible and may look unachievable, the last thing that you do is to go, I mean, the regulator reports to Parliament, is to go back to Parliament and say, sorry, we can't implement this act. 5 years is too short. You don't do that. You take the marching orders, you do as much as you can in the time that you've been allocated, and if you do not achieve that, you go back and ask for an extension, but you don't ask for an extension before showing what you can or you can't do. So 5 years is what we have to navigate through this journey that I'm going to take you through. As we navigate through this journey, we are also guided by what is it that this competitive electricity market must achieve? Why are we doing this? The big answer is that we must solve the energy trilemma. We must ensure that when we deliver the product 5 years from now or 4 years from now, we're delivering a product that's going to ensure that the electricity supply is secure. And when I say secure, I mean that it is going to be available, there will be no load shedding, it is going to be transmittable, there would be no load reduction in areas where the system cannot take that, and it's also going to be of the quality that is required for the populace to make use of. As we do that, we have to solve the other problem. We have to make the electricity services that would come as a product of the or result of the market efficient, and they must ensure that the operations are also efficient, the costing is efficient, it must be affordable. I think we have had a lot of reforms and a lot of things that have been done, but I am still to find a person who is comfortable with the price of electricity in this country. I don't hold this record with pride, but when I started at the energy regulator, the price of electricity was 16 cents per kilowatt hour. When I left as a full-time regulator member 11 years later, it had increased by more than 600%. It's a record that no one should be proud of. But at that time, it was something that was required to be done because it was said that a lot of our electricity services are being subsidized, and it's about time we got your electricity services to cost-reflective tariffs. And yes, some of the costs were inefficient, but I think the operating word in what has happened is that we have had inefficient costs and inefficient ways of building power plants, but we now have to find a way of stopping that and ensuring that our electricity services are affordable. And the last bit of this trilemma that we must solve, and these are all equally important, as you would know what a trilemma would say, is that whatever production of electricity is done, it must be done from environmentally sustainable means. And I know that the first thing that springs up when you talk about environmentally sustainable needs is that you're talking renewables, solar, PV, and unfortunately, as I stand here, I talk about what the policy of this country talks about. The policy of this country says that we will use all of the resources that are available in this country to generate electricity. And that means that we will use nuclear, we will use coal, but find ways of making them environmentally sustainable. We will use solar, wind, hydro, and all of those. And I didn't say this, Dave, to appease you. But that's what we must solve. And this has not been an easy task in all of the dealings that we have had. I think when we started with the renewable energy program, the prices were not the greatest. But where we are right now, we are getting to the levels of the prices that would assist with this. We have seen other developments in the other technologies, and we think that this is achievable. The only unfortunate thing about policies and implementation of these policies is that you do not see the results in years. You see the results in decades. And that is what we have to have in mind as we go through this discussion, that we're not going to see it next year, we're not going to see it the next following year, but over a decade, we'll be able to trace back that this result that we have of a solved trilemma was a result of the actions that were taken earlier. We are also guided by the Electricity Regulation Act. Its objects require us to ensure that as the electricity supply industry or infrastructure is developed, it is done in an orderly manner. We have seen recently or lately when we had load shedding and the proliferation of other sources of electricity. That on its own is nothing bad. But when it is not done in a manner that is orderly, it can compromise the very system that we are trying to build. We have another requirement in the Electricity Regulation Act that in what we are going to be doing, we must ensure that we serve and safeguard the needs not just of the present consumers, but of the future consumers. We must not make decisions that may make us step aside certain things, but give the burden to those who will follow after us. So all of the decisions that we must make must ensure that the needs of the present and future electricity consumers are safely met and catered for. We also have to ensure that in the way that we structure our rules and the regulations, which is what we have the mandate to do, we do it in a manner that facilitates investments and MOSO facilitates access to these electricity services that we are tasked to regulate. The one that is very aligned with the topic that I'm going to discuss today is that we must promote competitiveness and ensure that customers or end users have a choice of who supplies them. And in dealing with that, we must also ensure that we find this fair and sometimes very delicate balance between what the different stakeholders are looking for. I think I would be representing all of you here that what you are looking for is a service that has an efficient and an effective and a least cost, and that you would be willing to pay for. Anything that is not efficient, that is not least cost, is not what you require. A lot of the investors that are investing here are also looking for returns that are better than them just leaving their money in the bank and getting the interest that it would get from having the bank. Just those two conflicting requirements are a challenge to deal with. We also have an incumbent utility as well as municipalities that have over the years owned the infrastructure, operated the infrastructure. They were the only ones that could operate and own this infrastructure. Now, all of a sudden, when there's going to be other parties, and all of a sudden, when consumers are going to have a say in how the infrastructure is expanded, you will get that sort of resistance. And you have to find, as a regulator, means and ways of balancing, delicate as it may be, but balance all of those interests and ensure that you achieve what you've been set out to do. I'm going to ask you, it's not moving. Excuse me. So we have had what the Electricity Regulation Act as amended says we must do. It says that we must create a competitive electricity market. Now, a lot of us would have seen the development of the South African wholesale electricity market, SAIEE for short. You would have seen the National Energy Regulator also requiring people who would serve in their boards in the Electricity Market Advisory Forum, and a whole host of other forums that are being formed. At the moment, we talk about a market design. I am going to talk about the fact that just saying that we will operate on a day-ahead market, which means that the generators would come and put in their price the day before, which is the price that they would sell their electricity at, and there will be other generators that may be called in to deal with the shortfalls that may come in between the day that the other generators put their bids in and the day that and the actual day, which is your intraday market, and the fact that you also need an entity that is going to be balancing this energy, considering that what you sometimes focus may not really be the actual, and cater for all of the other things that may be happening in between. That's what we talk about. We say that that's the market we are supposed to be in. The fact and the truth of the matter is that that's not the market. There's got to be something much more in the design of a market than this. So I'm giving you problem number one. The problem number one is we're talking about the market design, but I don't think that we are at that point where we can say we have the market design. We are short-circuiting the market design by saying that we'll have a market code. We are starting to develop market rules, and they are being led by the incumbent national transmission company. And when you have a situation like that, when there is no template, there's no clear definition and no clear direction of what is going to be the design of the market, you are starting on the wrong foot. And that's one of the things that we have to curb. In fact, any of you who have ever been in any of the discussions of the SAIEE, the South African Wholesale Electricity Market, would have witnessed that when someone from the National Transmission Company is talking, someone from another division of Eskom will be querying what they're saying. And not that that is unhealthy, but it is a clear indication of the fact that we haven't got to that stage where we have a market design. And once we have that market design, we are then going to have the market rules that are going to be developed to implement that design. So as I said, that's problem number one. The second problem that we have is, if you look at the participants, I think the participants of the market is your Eskom generation, distribution to some extent, and NTCSA being the one leading this, who are supposed to apply for their market operator license and the system operator license, as well as just to be assigned that they are the central purchasing agency. You then have independent power producers that are part of the mix. You have traders, and as you have heard, I also work for a trader. You have customers that are connected onto the high voltage and medium voltage side. But you do not have municipalities, yet 50% of the electricity distributed in this country is done by municipalities. So that's the second problem. That's the second hiccup we are going to have. In this that we're having, we are also having traders and IPPs. I shouldn't be saying this, but unfortunately, I'm not talking here as PowerX, I'm talking here as NASA. Traders and IPPs will start operating in both the wholesale electricity market and the retail market, whilst distributors or your municipalities are not allowed or are not enabled to operate in this. That on its own is going to create hurdles and troubles that we don't require. So in this road that we are envisaging, we need to first solve those problems and deal with those problems decisively so that as we go forward, as retailers or municipal distributors as we have them now, and even Eskom distributors play in this space, they have an understanding of what game they are playing and where they are going to be playing. We have an end in mind of what we would like to have, but we must just look at this end in sight that we have right now. In your end in mind scenario, if you try and implement what the Electricity Regulation Act says and its objects, it says that customers, especially those with their own generation, will also be able to buy electricity, sell electricity, whether it's directly to customers or to traders, or sell it to the market, whichever would make economic sense to it. The same would happen with the generators. They would be able to sell to anyone that they would want to sell to. Distributors, retailers would also be able to sell. But embedded in that is that distributors have to start looking at what they are best positioned to do. Most of the distributors, let's forget the inefficiencies and other issues that we may have with our municipalities. Let's assume that they will get to that point where they are capable distributors, have to start looking at a different role. Unfortunately, the Municipal Finance Management Act and the other acts that would enable that have not been aligned. So we have a challenge in how we are going to do that. I think the market operator, system operator, and the central purchasing agency, if you look at the Electricity Regulation Act, the amended Electricity Regulation Act, it clearly defines all of the functions. You would find no less than 10 functions in each of those. So there is no issue in that. We are nowhere near the end in mind. And yet when you speak to people in general, people expect that if I have a solar system, yes, in Cape Town and in other places, you can sell your power back to the grid, but it's still localized. It is not at a point where it can be done with. There are technical challenges around that once you start having this, you have to have your tap changes, the voltages increase so that in every place you don't have a volt drop that takes the voltage lower than the required operating voltage. Those are technical challenges. On their own, they are not insolvable. They are there, difficult to solve, but they will be solved. There are solutions for that. But if you look at what we have right now, the end in sight with the balancing agent or balancing market, the intraday, we are only going to have consumers that are connected to the HV and MV, high voltage and medium voltage, only being able to buy and sell directly to traders and customers and the others. We already have consumers that do that. We'll only have some of the generators that are able to sell to these. And the distributors will only have those that have been permitted, which means the other 50% of our distributors are not going to be able to participate in this. And yes, the central purchasing agents and the system operator and the market operator are probably poised to be better positioned to make this realization of the market. I'm bringing this to your attention to indicate that as much as we have started with the wholesale electricity market, as much as we have started doing a number of things, we still have a lot to do to get to what the Electricity Regulation Act requires us to do. It requires us to ensure that we have an environment or a market that is competitive, where end users can choose who supplies them. It is not an impossible market. All of our SAIEE may have changed their cell phone providers once or twice in their life. And that is what is required in the electricity supply industry, that I want to change my contract to be supplied by this supplier rather than this supplier. It may be a little bit complex, more complex than cell phones, but I think the idea is there. It can be done, and it is being done in other countries and in other jurisdictions. I'm struggling with this. So what do we have in our policy pathways as the country? I think the Minister of Electricity and Energy is most likely going to announce the latest integrated resources plan, and the transmission company has, to a large extent, given the transmission development plan, the TDP. We have questions that we must ask around the implementation of the integrated resources plan in whatever form it would be. There are certain technologies where it's given who is going to be doing that, like your nuclear. It is known who will deal with nuclear. But there are other technologies where it's not clear who's going to be doing that. The role of the state versus that of the private sector is not clear. It is hoped that the private sector would participate a great deal, but we have also had our own Eskom announcing the Eskom Green. So it is not clear how it's going to happen. And the reason that is a concern is that if it is not clear how it is going to happen, then the development of the market also becomes questionable, because if you are going to have investments from the private sector or investment from, then the pricing of the electricity that's going to emanate from that becomes an issue. We still have to decide on whether, when I say we, I mean as a country, whether the renewable energy IPP procurement program must continue. And if it continues, how will it play in the market? Because that program says you bid at this price, and if you are going to have a day-ahead market, which price are they going to bid? Those power purchase agreements are guaranteed take-or-pay agreements, and if they are going to bid in the market, how are they going to bid? I'm sure they would like it when the prices are high, which normally happens when you have a shortage of generation. But I think when the prices are low, it would be a problem. I was trying to look and see if there's anyone in the audience who would get me into trouble when I mention this. But when you look at the operations of Eskom in the last week or so, we haven't been using the open cycle gas turbines. So it means our system is doing very well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, means that our system marginal price is in the cents range. But before that, when we were using, like during the winter period and that, when we were using our open cycle gas turbines, our system marginal price was on the other side of 2 or 3 rand. Now let's imagine this situation, that some of these IPPs that have been selected as preferred bidders, I mean, some of their prices are around your 50, 60 cents. So if they are going to play in the market, surely they would want to play when the system marginal price is in the 2, 3 rands. But I'm not sure if they would want to play when the system marginal price is on the other side. And because they have take-or-pay agreements, and yes, I know they will be in the central purchasing, they will be governed or run by the central purchasing agency. But the point I'm trying to make is that we need clarity on how it is going to be done. We need to also ensure that the benefits that we can reap as a country are also shared amongst all, and not only shared by your take-or-pay agreements and other agreements that may be there. So that then brings the next question, that we are going to have an IRP. It says we will have so many megawatts from solar, so many from wind, and are we still going to continue doing it through RIP? And if we are going to do that, then we must start talking about these vesting contracts or some hedging that must be required. I have already said that one of our limitations in the way that we have built the system is that we're dependent on Eskom. There was an Eskom manager that acted as competition that ensured that we build transmission system, we build power plants. That is, before we didn't do it correctly. Let's say before 2001, when Eskom was the power company of the year, all of the things that utilities needed to do were being done, and Eskom was doing them so well. So we had that. But right now, we're at the point where we need to understand that when you are going to expand your generation, that is, find generators that you are going to use to ensure that you reduce the price, those that would come in and sell electricity at lower prices. You also have to remember that your transmission system complements your generation. And if you do not make those go hand in hand, we are most likely not going to achieve what is required. At this stage, yes, there's a tender out for transmission companies to build power lines, but that also needs to be embedded in a manner that is clear in the policy. For now, it is being tried. Maybe it will work, and if it doesn't work, where do we go back to? And even in this market design, as I had indicated, that yes, we still need to know how it's going to work. How will it work? We still have a dominant player that, as we speak, Eskom probably provides more than, not probably, provides more than 80% of the power that's required. And they are still going to continue to do that, at least for the next decade. How is that power and dominance going to be mitigated when we are not clear about who is going to provide us with the 24-hour supply responsibility? We have to solve those problems if we want to reduce the market or mitigate the market dominance. If the market dominance is still going to provide us with affordable services at the quality that we expect, maybe then it is not unbecoming to still continue to have Eskom. Please help me with the slide. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more around the challenges that we foresee. I think I've spoken about the clarity around the market design. Right now, we have a market code that's under development, largely governed by NTCSA, and they're looking at it from their own window. When you would listen to how the other parts of Eskom, like generation, how uneasy and how unhappy they are with some of the rules, then you can see that on the legal side and on the regulatory issues, like your grid codes and all of these other things that this system has been built around, we have issues. I have spoken about the fact that traders are given, and IPPs are given an advantage. They can operate in both the wholesale and retail markets, and whilst others are being denied that opportunity. That is an issue. On the pricing side, we still have to determine and say, how is the pricing of these transmission systems going to be? We know what the generation will be, but how is the pricing going to be? Are we ever going to make sure that generators and even transmission, they recover the fixed costs? How much of those fixed costs must they recover? Because if you make the fixed cost higher, you are then going to discourage IPPs from building. If you make them lower, you are also going to make the incumbent have behaviors that are not assisting in creating this market. As I've already spoken, that once the system marginal price changes, you also then get pricing signals that may not be achieving the goal that was set. And your facilitation of investments is also going to be largely determined by how you deal with the pricing. I run a company called, PowerX, and we have bilateral arrangements and agreements with a number of customers. And our agreements are only considering the energy portion only, not the capacity. We just provide energy when it's required, and we bill for that. Someone else has to look after the fact that when you are running a system, you must have the capacity to be able to provide energy when it's required. It's not all the time. I think all of us here, we know that when we get home, we want to get home and switch on this and switch on that, it must work. But when we are not, right now, as we are not at home, somebody else has to make sure that when we get home, we have that power that we have, must provide that capacity. So there are those issues that really must be solved. We also have NTCSA that is owned by the Eskom state-owned company that expects returns from that. And how are those returns? Are we not going to get to a stage where customers are double paying for the generation part, paying for the requirements of returns by the state-owned company? We also have the influence of Eskom generation. In the past, we had Eskom influencing how the grid would be built. Where is it best to augment or enhance the grid, and all of those things. The Eskom peak and baseload prices, how are they going to be catered for in all of this? And I think I've spoken about the vesting contracts, and that for now I know that there are transitional arrangements that have been put in place to ensure that over the 5 years, most of the vesting contracts would have run out, and those generators would go into the market. I know that at this stage, I've just told you or given you problems. And I'm not sure that my other slides are going to be telling you any solutions. But what is going to be good in all of this is that when we get into the market, we are no more going to have Eskom's or any other generator for that matter, its pricing being bundled up in some cost structure. We are going to have cost per power station, understand what the costs are, and also then enable that those who can generate at lower costs are the ones that must be selected. Same as with the transmission system. We are also going to understand what does it really cost per kilometer of the network, rather than these bundled costs. The one advantage that I think we are also going to get from this is for this integration of the renewable energies, the grid has to be modernized. And talking about the grid, I mean both the transmission and the distribution grid, because we are required to ensure that there's non-discriminatory access to these grids. And then additional investments are going to be made, and that's really, for me, a positive. We will have new business models. I probably wouldn't be standing here talking about this and Power X if it wasn't for the opportunities that existed when traders were allowed and they could trade. Forget the part around, I was talking to an Eskom colleague as I was walking in here, and he was saying that he's seeing me for the first time since Eskom launched the case against traders. So he was trying to explain that it's not really on traders, that it's the whole business. And I understand that it's the whole business. Things are not clear. Things need to be spelled out on how the new system would work. And I think what we all need to remember is that the Electricity Regulation Act legislates the existence of traders. So it is us who have not developed the rules and made the strides that are required. But the legislation requires us to have traders, and traders will exist and coexist with the existing service providers. We are expecting that once all of these costs are laid to the bear, the costs that have always been ununderstandable in some of the power stations is the usage of oil and gas to the levels that it would be. I remember that way back in 2005, the cost of oil and gas in the power stations did not exceed 100 million rand. And by 2016, it was still nowhere near 500 million rand. But as we speak now, your oil and gas costs, yes, there may be reasons, but that increase from 500 million rand to 8 billion rand a year is not understandable. But once we have a view of how the system, how the power stations costs are, then we have an opportunity of ensuring that they compete based on their costs and the revenue that they can provide. We have an Eskom that is 80% of the power, an Eskom that is 90% of the infrastructure and transmission. The development of the market, even if it is now done by the National Transmission Company, is not going to immediately mitigate the dominance of the incumbent. The dominance of the incumbent is only going to be mitigated by investments that would be made in both the generation system and the transmission system, as well as the distribution system. I know that the market we're talking about now is still the wholesale electricity market. I can see that most of you are now agreeing with me, even in things that you shouldn't agree with me on. So I'm going to conclude so that we can have a discussion. The road ahead is still very long. It's not clear, as it should be, for what we want to do when we want to create, when we want to solve the energy trilemma. The final destination, when we get to that point where we say we have created the market, we need one that is going to show that it has been socially efficient and it is a competitive electricity market. The one need that all users want is that they want to get electricity at the lowest possible cost. If we meet that, we probably will meet all of the other needs. And I have to repeat that the results of this exercise, I think not many of us would still be interested in the electricity industry by the time we see the results. It's not going to be in the next few years. These results will be evident decades from today. The one point when you read how other countries, the 3 decades of really deregulating, introducing competitive markets, and introducing new players, whether it would be gas or combined gas cycles and renewables, is that electricity market reforms is mainly and partly an art than it is like pure science and pure economics, where you say if you do this, you'll get this. There's an art involved. There are many changes that have been made. So as we go through our own reform, what we must know is that we will have unintended consequences. And what we must prepare for going forward is that we are going to reform this reform. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bukula. Please don't go. Yeah, okay. We're going to have a Q&A now. This is actually indeed a discussion, not so much a Q&A per se. So you are welcome to even come up with comments. Those online, I don't know if there's anyone looking at the chats to see if there's any comments online as well. So let's open the floor for any questions and comments. Okay. Oh, I was going to start, but it's fine. I see Engineer William Stuckey's hand. Please speak onto the mic.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself. Thank you.
I'm William Stuckey. I'm a council member and a consultant in the telecoms field primarily. I see that, sir, that you're a chief executive officer of a energy trader, and you're also the chairman of the National Energy Regulator. Surely this is a conflict of interest.
Did you get the question, sir? Yeah. Just wanted to check with your capacity in terms of how many questions we can take at the time. No, at the time?
I can
answer this one. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I appreciate this question, and let me also confess to you that everywhere else I go, that's the first question I have to answer. And my answer to your question is that the Electricity Regulation Act and the National Energy Regulator Act requires that when people are appointed at the energy regulator, they must have the qualifications, the experience, the expertise, the knowledge to do what they're required to do. So that first box, I want to say that I tick that box. The second thing that the National Energy Regulator Act requires is that, in fact, most businesses that we have, that if there is a matter that is being discussed or a decision is going to be made on, and you have interest, and the energy regulator even says you have pecuniary interest. So I saw your hand, so I was...
When you finished, I'd like to respond.
Okay. So when you have pecuniary interest, you must recuse yourself. You cannot be part of that discussion, nor part of that decision when you have pecuniary interest. So as an electricity trader, anything and everything where it is said that I would have pecuniary interest, I recuse myself. There are, however, those parts or elements where I cannot recuse myself from, not because the interest is, I mean, for instance, in deciding on what the average price increase would be, yes, you may argue that I have pecuniary interest, but then I would argue that nobody else in this country would not have pecuniary interest because they are going to pay the electricity prices at them. So the requirement and the test is that I must ensure that in matters where I have interest, pecuniary or not, I do not form part of that discussion, and I recuse myself from the decision-making process. And that's what the Electricity Regulation Act and the National Energy Regulator Act requires.
May I suggest then that those acts are faulty? I was an ICASA councillor, an executive director of the board from 2009 to 2014, and before I was able to take up my position, I had to, myself and my family had to divest of all interests in the telecoms, postal, and broadcasting interests. Industries. We were not allowed to own a single thing. So that we could avoid any possibility of conflict of interest.
Okay, let's do it this way. We're going to sit up front here, and then we'll use these microphones to answer the question.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. That's why I wanted
Yeah.
to sit over there.
We will ask you then to repeat your last comment again, William, please. Thank you.
Sorry, Pascal. Then may I suggest with respect that the legislation you refer to is faulty. I was a regulator. I was in the ICASA councillor for 2009 to 2014. And under the ICASA Act, both myself and all my members of my immediate family had to divest of all interests in the telecoms, broadcasting, and postal industries. So I had to give away my ISP business and sell my license before I could take up my post.
Thank you, sir. And that's exactly what I did when I was a full-time regulator member, because the law says that if you're a full-time member, then you can't have any other interests. Unfortunately, this one, which the state law advisors have also been comfortable with, or passed, because it's not the one that I made, says that if you are not an executive member of the energy regulator, you declare your interest, you recuse yourself from that. As to whether it's faulty or not, I'm comfortable with your opinion.
Okay, thank you. I also saw another hand from Professor Dave Nichols.
Thank you, Pascal. To introduce myself, I'm Dave Nichols. I'm a councillor on SAIEE. I'm ex-Eskom. I'm currently chairman of NEXA. So I have a, not NERSA. We keep being accused of being the same people. It is quite funny when I get accused of being part of NERSA, and I think, not me. I just want to put, I've got a couple of comments, but I don't want to go them all at once, otherwise I'll be here. And I want to put just a view, because I'm worried that we've got a fundamentally flawed approach to this whole energy market discussion. And I'm going to go back in history a bit, and I apologize, but it's going. The world lived with state-regulated or state-owned utilities for power generation across the world from the 1920s through to the 1990s. In the 1990s, there was an increasing fashion to move away from that. And you mentioned very clearly, and I liked it, that decisions, policy changes take decades to come through. And the world in the late 80s, early 90s started to move to get the state out of the business. And the earliest bit of that for everyone who doesn't realize, it was the Office of Public Enterprises was created by P.W. Botha in 88 or 89 to sell off the utilities. That's why Eskom moved from what was then DMEA, it's changed names a few times, across to that. And I think that people don't, that you put up the trilemma of cost-effective, good service, environmentally sustainable, and I'd argue that Eskom achieved that rather well, and most of the rest of the world achieved that rather well. But there was a philosophical discussion that we must get rid of the state. And I think what's also misunderstood, and I was in Eskom clear at the time, is that when the 98 energy policy came out, there was a presumption that Eskom didn't want to lose its monopoly. And that actually was the exact opposite. Eskom Finance was staring at the need to build more six-packs. Forget the cost you want to talk about, but in today's numbers, 100 billion rand each. And they didn't want to go near that with a barge pole. Their view was, we don't want to build new power stations. So when the government came along and said, we think you shouldn't build it, the free market should, Eskom said, they complained just enough to get the complaint noted. And so we could get Thabo Mbeki to apologize in 2007 when the lights went out because it was his fault. But they didn't apologize, complain too much. And we moved Eskom staffing down from 68,000 when I joined in 84 to below 30,000. And that was because we removed the construction program from Eskom completely. So I just want to make those comments that I think that I agree with you entirely. It takes decades for these policies to work through, and across the world, we are seeing the move away from a state-controlled, centrally planned utility system, be it water, be it roads, be it sewage, electricity, to a free market. And it's taken us, and not just us, the world, something like 30 years to realize the wheels are falling off. And I think that we must recognize it. And I just a last comment, it's really a commentary. If you look at our economic policy, economic performance, we stopped growing in 2007. The economy stopped growing because there was no power. Because if you're an investor in heavy plant, you don't invest in a new mine or a new smelter if there is no promise of power. So you look at the graph of our growth, and it's very simple. We flatlined from 2007. Most developing countries did not. They went on growing. The first world flatlined to an extent, but they had excess employment, too many PhDs, and we're doing too well. We haven't got those problems. If we've got too little unemployment, I'd like to see where the person thinks that is. So that's my just general comment. And I think that we may be worth thinking. I've got two very specific comments about the NERA, which both I find very interesting. One is that the NERA explicitly allows NERSA to amend any license condition. That means anybody building a power station does not know what the rules will be when it comes into service. I'm not sure how you do an investment on that basis. I'm not sure how anyone puts money into anything on the basis that they may change the rules at any time, and there's no appeal process in the act of how you appeal that. There's no rationale for it. It doesn't say you must only do this if it's in the best interest of A, B, and C. And my last comment is, you mentioned that conflict of interest, William. I'll give you a different conflict of interest, nothing's personal. You're now making NTCSA both the trading house and the central purchasing authority. You've just complained that Eskom, or not you, but the government's complained that Eskom is both a player in the game and the rule setter. You just explicitly set up NTCSA, so it acts as a department which is running the traders and a department which is running bulk purchases and competing with the traders. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. Just comments on those thoughts. I ran on too long. I apologize to everyone, but those are some thoughts. Someone who's been in the industry for more than a week and has saw the 98 energy policy and Eskom being split into 3 organizations with 3 boards, with 3 sets of financials in 2000 with an aim to get the free market in. And the free market didn't turn up. The free market only turned up post 2005 and 6 when the government said, we will guarantee your investment. That's not a free market. That's a boondoggle.
Thank you, Dave. Like you said, I think these are comments, and sometimes there is nothing to add to a beautiful comment like some of the ones that you have made. It is true that our current design has got some flaws in it, but I also think that these are the flaws that can be fixed now that we have identified them at the very beginning. What we do not want to do is to entrench certain measures that after a while we would not be able to take them off. So those have been identified, and yes, I think in the next paper that the Department of Energy, which formulates policy, must make, it then must address these flaws. The second point that you've made around the National Energy Regulator Act and its ability to say you can amend any other licensed condition, there are certain parts. In fact, when we were going through this renewable energy independent power procurement program, there were discussions around the very point that you had mentioned, and there are certain parts of the Act that would require that if there is a change in the decision, and mind you, my law degree is only from the University of Nassau, so I don't have a proper one. So there are certain parts in that would say that once you've made a decision as the regulator, just like when we made the 54 billion rand error, we saw it before Eskom could make a noise about it, but there's a principle in law that once you have made the decision, you, as a decision maker, you can't just change. It's called a functus officio thing. So I think that is a safeguard for that limitation in the National Energy Regulator Act. The third point that you're mentioning, Dave, around the reduction in the demand, yes, it's there and it's continuing to go down. And that is not how we are going to grow, and that is not how we are going to have the pricing structures that solve the energy trilemma. And I think on NTCSA, you are right in the issue around the conflict of interest and the closeness of NTCSA to Eskom. But unfortunately, when you also understand that most of the covenants that Eskom has in their loans and the others prevent Eskom from being totally and completely separated as it was envisaged in the 1998 white paper and all of that. So until those loans have been paid and until certain things have been done, we may have to do with this semi-independent structure or system. But I also have to commend NTCSA to a large extent that since they have been given their license, yes, they have a separate board, yes, they still report to Eskom, but there are certain strides that they have made to show the intention to be independent. But thank you for your comments there.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand from Dr. Hay.
Angus Hay, past president, SAIEE. Maybe if we're doing full disclosure, also consumer of electricity at various levels, including from IPPs and some self-generation. I'm intrigued by another inherent flaw which appears to be present in the legislation. And you spoke about 50% of distribution, i.e. the municipalities being completely left out of the equation. Is it even possible to achieve the objectives of the Act if half of the distribution, half of the consuming market doesn't get any benefit or effectively is excluded from the process and therefore is permanently disadvantaged by virtue of where they are? And as a consumer, we have exactly that problem. The best way to get better electricity pricing in South Africa is to move. No, outside of a municipality.
I'm not sure if I'm going to answer the part. Is it possible? but let me go around this. That it is a point that has now been identified, and it is a point that has to be solved in the conclusion of the market design, because it is not only that they have been excluded, it is also the part that traders and Mr. Starkey, I'm now declaring, traders, the one that I run, now can get into the municipal customers and customer base and trade in there, yet the municipality cannot do anything. So part of this is also understanding that I mean, for a long time there was only one trade in this country, and these effects were not understood. But when we bring them to the fore, sometimes when you do things, it's not only for your own good pocket, it's also for the good of the country. And I work at the regulator because I know that I can also do things that are for the good of the country. If raising that is going to reduce our ability to trade, but do good for the rest of the country, so be it. So in your point that you've made, it's not possible to achieve what is required by solving the energy trilemma if we are leaving distribution on the outside. Distribution, municipal distributors have to be on the inside. And that's the change in the market design that must be made. Thank you.
Okay, speaking of traders, there was a statement you made earlier when you were presenting Eskom owns 90%, I think, of the transmission grid, and they generate 80% of the electricity of the country. Now, given that South Africa is a core player in the Southern African power pool, how do you envisage, I'm just wondering, how do you envisage this new market operator, system operator, and central purchasing agency to execute its mandate effectively and efficiently across geographic borders, difficult monetary currencies, and particularly violently swinging exchange rates? How do you envisage?
As we speak, Eskom, through the National Transmission Company, operates in the Southern African power pool. And there was a stage where they were the dominant player and dictated how things should flow, but right now they are no more the dominant player, but they operate in that, and the trading that's being done, your SAP offices are in Zimbabwe, the trading that's being done is similar to what is being proposed here, this day-ahead market, and it's done in dollars, and it's a system that has worked. It's a system that where Eskom has practiced some of the things that they need to do. So I'm of the view that, I mean, the SAP is now over 20 years, and it's been run relatively profitable, and the challenges that they have of grid constraints and all of that are challenges that need to be solved by all of the players, not just Eskom, but they have been an effective player. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have comments online? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, there's two questions from online. It's from Mohammed Khan. The first one was, considering the expectations, would it not make sense to also establish a distribution system operator as well? And then the second question, can we ever sort the trilemma without adequately addressing non-technical losses like rampant energy theft, which also results in municipal debt?
The answer to the first question is that as this market develops, when we talk about that end in mind, it is not going to happen without having the distribution system or the distribution part or the last part of the electricity supply industry being a player. There has to be a retail market, which is going to be the one run by your distribution system operator. So it's something that has to happen if we want to get to that point where we have end user choice, we have competitiveness, and a whole host of the other things that the Act requires. In the one of non-technical losses, I have to say that until in fact the Electricity Regulation Act, in the way that it has been amended, the other amendment that's there is that if you tamper with electricity or the electricity infrastructure, or that is steal electricity or do other things, then yes, you will you can be jailed. The old act didn't have that. I mean, I remember when I was at Eskom, we went to Mbangeni police station to report someone that we had found who was breaching or had breached the meter and did other things. And the cops said to us, yeah, what are you reporting? So we're reporting theft of electricity. He said, okay, do you have an exhibit? We didn't have an exhibit, and that was the end of that. So for a long time, the definition of theft which says that you have taken something from someone without their permission, and was not applying. In fact, there's not a single person in South Africa who's in jail for stealing electricity. You'll find those that have forged prepayment things and other things, but not for stealing electricity. This act now says that anything that you do to the infrastructure that may cause damage, including what we consider theft, you then can be jailed. It's nice to have it in legislation. I just don't know the implementation of it if I consider the deficiencies that we have both in the Eskom and the municipal distribution businesses. But it is what has to be solved for us to do that. But the other part around this is I know that the first assumption is what is very visible to us, that the non-technical losses or electricity theft is happening in your informal or low-income areas. But the biggest part of theft also happens in the big industrials around here. They are the biggest thieves and the ones who make the biggest dent in the electricity revenue generation. But the points mentioned are very valid. We need to solve those in order to solve the energy trilemma. Thank you.
Over to you, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Professor Sandrine Mubenga. I'm from the University of Toledo in Ohio in the United States, and I'm here at WITS for a year on a Fulbright US scholarship. So my question to the chairman is based on a couple of slides that I found interesting, the end in mind versus the end in sight. And then the comment that you made that solar photovoltaic, that due to load shedding, there has been a proliferation of distributed generation in South Africa, and that's okay, but it has to be done in order. That was the comment. So this led me to have some questions about net metering, because as you know, for solar photovoltaic systems, if a residential customer is able to produce electricity, they will be able to sell it back to the grid company through bidirectional meters. But this is possible if we have a system such as net metering. So my questions to you are, what is the regulatory framework in South Africa about net metering? And then how effective is really net metering currently in South Africa? I participated to the African Energy Forum in Cape Town in June, where you were speaking, and I also participated in a panel with Mr. Neil, who is in charge of the Cape Town, the municipality, and he mentioned that net metering exists. So I'm curious to find out how effective is net metering here in South Africa, and also as a regulator, what are the means and the way in place to evaluate the success of net metering? And the last question is your personal opinion. What is your take on net metering? Thank you.
So net metering is allowed in South Africa, and it is happening. But it is happening in selected areas. And it's those areas where the distribution infrastructure and the metering infrastructure is up to standard. City of Cape Town, for instance, does net metering. And the reason it has not been an issue is that most of the people who installed solar PV systems in Cape Town didn't install them to make money out of them. They installed them because they wanted to improve their quality of life. So they are fine if they buy electricity from the grid at R1 and only get paid 40 cents when they put in their grid, and they work just fine. In other areas, why net metering hasn't been that effective is that the requirements. For instance, in the Eskom networks, you have to pay twice the amount of the solar system that you put in to be able to sell power back into the grid. But net metering is working and it's happening. It is also part of what has been approved as a working document by NASA, I think way back in March, a revision of that net metering thing. So net metering is happening. It's just that when you look at some of the systems, the their ability to take power from bidirectional power is limited, and there is no enforcement of the metering equipment that is capable of doing what's required for net metering.
Thank you, sir. My venerable chairperson, Mr. Bukula, I do not want to sound alarmist, but I will regurgitate the words of the Honorable Professor Dave. Just to add to what you are saying, mine is not a comment per se, it's a question. Of the trilemma that you mentioned, that is security of supply, that is affordability, and protecting the environment. Your title, I liked it. You spoke of a journey. The Chinese have a proverb that says, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And obviously, you know where you want to end for your journey, and you plan accordingly. So my question is as follows. Considering the free market fundamentals, the advent of the IPPs, the RAPPP, juxtaposed with what is happening, well, in fact, what happened in the early 2000s in California, there was a company called Enron. When I come to think of that free market fundamentals, prices are as elasticity, supply and demand, and how as a regulator, how have we ensured that in this journey that we want to embark on, we are well protected from those free market fundamentals? I like the idea of deregulation to a certain extent, but how do we make sure that we are not left vulnerable? There are structures in place to protect the common man on the ground. I want to thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I probably going to struggle to say how are we protected, but what I think we would be doing by raising these issues, we are creating the protection structures and measures that are required to ensure that we never get to a stage where we have shortage of power generation because we didn't create an environment that would enable those who can invest in generation invest. Like I had said, that we have to watch what our fixed cost pricing structure is. We have to watch what how we deal with our system marginal pricing. There's a lot of things that we must do so that we don't get into the same trap. I think in California, it was not just the generation, it was also the transmission. So we also have to ensure that our transmission system is not left behind in all of this. And I think as we speak, we have just approved congestion curtailment for Eskom to deal with some of these. But you also must remember that when you have an incumbent that is running your generation system and it is short of funds or is not incentivized to expand the grid, it can also game the system by creating its own funds from congestion and gaming the grid. So those are things that we're aware of, And hence we're saying that as we are building the system, we must never think that the generation system works on its own. It's complementary. The transmission system is complementary to that. But we also are forgetting, and I think Mr. Hayes mentioned something, that we cannot forget the distribution, that last mile. If you look at this market that we're talking about now, it is good for those who are connected to the high voltage or medium voltage system. It doesn't talk about most of us here. And we have to find a way of ensuring that the investments and the measures that are required to protect against your price elasticity and the forces, the invisible hand of the free market, are taken into consideration. But right now, I think maybe you've characterized it right, that we're on step 1 of 1,000 steps. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other further comments? Yes, Prof.
I'm just going to ask the question, and I'll pick on the lady's question. I'm sorry, I missed your name. In the time, I'm intrigued by the approach taken for feed-in tariff. And my real question is, in the nurses' approach to this, are you expecting dynamic feed-in tariffs that actually reflect the then cost of energy on the grid system? Because we know that something like California, the grid price goes negative about half the days of the year. Midday is classical. So you've got the insane situation in some countries where you're paying expensive feed-in tariff rates when the actual cost on the grid is negative. And so my question is NERSA proposing, forcing, whatever to call it, that feed-in tariffs must reflect the dynamic time of use costs? You mentioned earlier, this week it's below 40 cents because at the moment, 2 weeks ago, it was R5 a unit because we're burning diesel fuel. I just asked the question.
I didn't mention 40 cents a day, but I think you know the number because we're close to it.
If it was Coburg, it'd be 7 cents, but we'll pass on that bit.
So, Dave, when it comes to the 2 cities that run this, I don't think that it would be true to call it dynamic, but in the meters that they have, in the pilot that was run, because they're on time of use tariffs, so the tariffs, the feed-in tariffs change in accordance with the time of use tariffs that the municipality has. But the ratio of how you get compensated is quite lopsided towards that of the municipality. We also had requested the town that is normally empty for the better part of the year, one of these holidays, Plettenberg Bay, but most of those houses over there have solar PV systems that are not working during the course of the year and only work when the people take holidays. There was also a pilot that was run there trying to look at how you could do this dynamic setting of that. But I think at best what has been done now is really that it just goes according to the time of use tariff, which is close enough to dynamic. Thank you.
There's a lady at the back there. There's a hand.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Senosi. I work for Eskom, and I think I have been around in terms of being able to work for all 3 divisions. However, disclaimer, I'm not here representing Eskom. I'm on my personal capacity. You've mentioned on your last slide, I quote, the results of the exercise may only be evident in decades or years. So my question is that given that the electricity market reforms may only yield visible results over decades and only could lead to unintended consequences, in your opinion, what specific policy safeguards or the regulatory frameworks do you believe are most critical in terms of ensuring that the transition to the competitive electricity trading market does not compromise the electricity security, rather the energy security, the affordability, and also the social equity in a short to medium term? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Our electricity prices are largely dictated by Eskom's costs and Eskom's, let's say Eskom's costs. You have this advantage as Eskom. I'm sorry, I know that you're asking in your personal capacity, but I do know that they say once an Eskomite, always an Eskomite, your blood is blue. You have this advantage as Eskom that you have been provided by the electricity pricing policy that says that when the price is set for electricity, it must assume that the assets that you have must be valued at the modern equivalent asset value. And that gives you some advantage that no other IPP gets, because IPPs have that. And that's the first policy that must be changed to make us realize the outcomes of these reforms, at least in this decade. If it is not going to be changed, you will never realize it, because your assets as Eskom as a whole are no more than 400 billion rand, the true value. But the ones where we even made a mistake of 54 billion rand, as NASA, your modern equivalent asset value is sitting over 1 trillion rand, and you get a return on 1 trillion rand. It doesn't matter the fact that it's a reduced return, but the fact that you get a return on 1 trillion rand when you should be getting a return on 400 billion rand is one of the policies that needs to be changed. There are other policies that must be changed. For an example, every month at NESA, we receive a request by one of the industrials for a negotiated pricing agreement where they want their price to be not at Megaflex, but less, and they would have some profit share schemes in the process. But that is an indication that the prices are high. But when you look at the subsidies and the way that the subsidies are structured, if you would trim those subsidies and trim, for instance, we have the affordability subsidy that's close to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. That's a lot of money that the industrials have to pay, and if you would take that out, and unfortunately, it probably would also come out of our pockets in another way, in some tax or in that. But there are too many subsidies that we have in our electricity pricing structure that if they would be reduced, we would have results that are close to being immediate. That is, within years, we will be able to see the difference in that. And those are the two that I can just mention. Thank you.
Okay, maybe one last question or two before we can wrap up. Your hand is up, sir.
Maybe pass me the water.
Good evening. My name is Kifilwe. I'm a consumer, electricity consumer. My question, I think, clarity seeking questions, just for you to clarify what do you mean, like what do you mean by a customer and also by a trader? The other ones I'm fine, but these two, if you can clarify for me. Thanks.
Thank you. So traders are defined as those entities. So you must be licensed first to be a trader. Those entities that can buy electricity from a portfolio of generators across the country or in a municipality or within Eskom, and then they use the electrical system of either Eskom or the municipality to transport the power. Forget the fact that this is a little virtual, it's not the actual electrons going through that, and then sell on to customers. Those are traders. Now, customers, in the way that me and you are customers of electricity. We're customers of City Power or customers of Eskom or any other utility that provides electricity directly to us, the one that we pay our bill to. Have I answered?
So is the intention to allow, like, the customer to be able to ultimately choose whoever, like on the level of a house? Is that the intention?
Yes, that's exactly the intention. The end in sight thing, whether customers will be able to pool their power together and sell it onto a market at certain times, or a customer would be just wanting, as Prof. Sandri has asked, would just be wanting to sell power back to the utility. That's what the end state would be. If you have power, you can generate your own. You should be able to sell and get compensated for the power that you're selling to them. Thank you.
Okay, before I take that gentleman there at the back, let me just check online if they have any other comments or questions online. Nothing? Good. Okay, the gentleman at the back.
You hear me? I'm Gerald Mangara, a student here at WITS. My question has to do with the new role that we might have to face with the SAPP. We often talk about South Africans' energy challenges domestically, load shedding, energy grid constraints, and the energy transition. But we also play a role in the Southern African power pool. Looking ahead, our generation and transmission decisions don't just affect South Africa, they affect neighboring countries as well. So my question is, how do we see South Africa's role within the SACPP over the next decade? Will we remain the anchor exporter or providing baseload power, or transition to a flexible balancing hub integrating variable renewables, storage, and regional trade?
I was going to say I will pass and not answer your question, so I'm going to answer generally because I don't think I should speak for SAP. But the role of South Africa, if you look at the Integrated Resources Plan, the Integrated Resources Plan is not only looking at power that's going to be generated from within South Africa. It looks at power that would be imported from across the region. So NTCSA will remain a critical and important player in the Southern African power pool, not only because there's power that we send to the other countries, but because there's power that we would like to get from the other country. We get power at more than 1,000 megawatts from Kawara Basa, and it will continue to be something that NTCSA or South Africa would still continue to play a significant role in the region, making sure that there are interconnectors that are able to transmit the power that is required in between the countries, and making sure those investments do happen. I hope I have. Thank you.
All right, I'm being signaled that we need to come to a close. William, I see your hand is up still. Is it a burning question?
Yes, absolutely.
The world will end if you don't ask it.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bukula, for a fascinating talk. We ventilated a whole lot of false problems with the current legislation and policy. Perhaps we can discuss that afterwards. But the question I have for you now, and it is a burning question, is Eskom, in terms of small-scale embedded generation, SSSG, There are many reports of Eskom being a big bad bully. What is the regulator going to do about that?
The wheeling framework and the net billing framework that was published and approved recently in March tries to deal with part of the problem of Eskom and small-scale embedded generation. The part on the legal side that really prevents the regulator doing much is that we only regulate licensees. Small-scale embedded generators are not licensees. So when you have a small-scale embedded, you're a small-scale embedded generator and you have not been licensed or you have not been registered, which is also another loophole in the act, we probably cannot force the utility. You know, there's a section 19 of the Electricity Regulation Act says that all the infrastructure owners and operators are obliged, in fact, they must ensure that they provide non-discriminatory access to third parties. It may be at rates or charges that would be approved by the regulator, but you cannot prevent anyone from accessing that. But then third parties then get defined as those who have licenses. And so small-scale embedded generation, sometimes if you are not licensed or if you are not meeting all of those stringent requirements of Eskom, you are unable then to do that. But it is not something that that the regulator is very empowered to deal with because you are not a licensee.
I think you're missing the question, the point. If I put solar power on my roof, Eskom, some people from Eskom say I have to have an extra registered engineer to check that my roof is safe. And that is not anywhere in any regulations. Eskom made it up. Eskom is requiring people to spend tens or 50,000 rand extra because they think that they must. That's what I mean about Eskom being a bully.
Okay. Yes, I missed your question. I thought you were talking about it. And I think even Eskom, in some cases where they had tried to do that, they had stopped it. And I know that what Eskom had put forward is that some of the installations make it unsafe for their personnel to work. They would say they've de-energized the whole streets and some solar PV system would be injecting power through the transformer and getting to them. So it was for safety reasons more than anything. And maybe the way they went around doing it is the one that was not safe. But there is a safety concern. I mean, in Australia, for instance, it's not every person who has a solar PV system wants to register and wants to send their power through the grid. But when you have elected not to send your power into the grid, you get a system that ensures that when the system is dead, there is no way that you are able to feed back. I know that we'll say that it's just a breaker, but these inverters are also electronic things that have their own funny ways of feeding power that you didn't think it's feeding to the grid, but does feed it back to the grid, even without a CT.
No, I understand that. We all understand that. The question is, why does Eskom want to have a structural engineer?
I don't know why they require that. I wanted to tease and pull one of Eskom's guy to say, please answer, I don't work for Eskom, but Mr. Radis, I don't know. And I think they have stopped in cases where they had tried to bully when people push back. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap in terms of the questions and answers now. Yeah, the SAIEE as well, we are well endowed with lots of past president. So I wish to take this opportunity to call on past President Andries Mthethwa to give the vote of thanks. Thank
you. Just before the Prophet does, I know that I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be following your rules. But I do want to thank all of you for the questions, and I do want to say that I appreciate questions that are direct and questions that help us get stronger in what we are trying to do. So Mr. Starkis, please don't think that I would be avoiding you during dinner. I will still talk to you about the conflict of interest. Thank you. But thank you, all of you, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, colleagues. As has been said already, my name is Andres Mtetwa, past president of the Institute. Just to be formal, if I can recognize the host via the dean, Professor Majosi, and also the SAIEE past president, immediate past, we sometimes call him IPP. As hosts of this historical joint meeting, which has happened over many, many decades. And it is pleasant, and it is very, very enriching that this culture and relationship between the Institute and the University of the Witwatersrand continues. We wish it could continue even further. Mr. Majosi, thank you for hosting us. In this instance, also, I would like to thank the BP lecturer for the evening, Mr. Bukula, who is a well-known veteran in the industry, and also for agreeing to come and be our speaker or our lecturer for this historical lecture, which has got a very deep-rooted history between the Institute of Electrical Engineers in this country and Wits University. The first meeting was held at this university of this lecture. Also, thank you for your presentation, which is very relevant. It's clearly, we can see the way that it has elucidated all kinds of questions which are relevant to the subject at hand. And we really need answers because once we have done it, it will be very difficult to undo it. You have clearly listed the dilemma that the Act has actually let loose. It is, however, pleasing to hear that we have the benefit of this having been done in other countries, so we can learn from that. In terms of the challenge, this energy trilemma that we are talking about, the security of supply, affordability, and environmental sustainability, I think you have done an excellent analysis on how to deal and explain what these challenges really are. And also, you have clearly demonstrated what the future or immediate issues that we need to address in terms of what you call the prospects. Obviously, the cost and and price transparency is so important that we understand what is going on. The whole question of the grid modernization, our grid today faces all kinds of challenges, including vandalism. Thank goodness that we are dealing with very dangerous entity here, which is called electricity, especially high voltage. So some of the guys who try, they just go up in smoke. The whole question of innovation, we are challenged. This whole thing challenges us to come up with clear innovation in implementing the Act. The improvements that need to be realized in terms of performance and the mitigation of market dominance by what you call the incumbent. So really, I think you've done an excellent analysis of this challenge. As you've said, it's a long way to go. We still have a long, long way to go. But I think working together, we'll be able to resolve this issue and deliver on the promises of the Act and the intended aims of the whole Act in terms of trying to address the energy or the electricity trilemma. Mr. Bukula, our lecturer, the Institute appreciates your availability to address these issues and the questions that you answered so vividly and very clear, and we all appreciate that. We therefore thank you. You join a list of lecturers of these joint meetings that has been there for a long time. And in so doing, can ladies and gentlemen join me in giving our lecturer a gift as a token of our appreciation. I think I need a forklift to lift. If you can come forward, please, to accept it as a token of our appreciation.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, with that, then we bring the proceedings to a close. I want to thank everyone that attended today, both here in person and online. Those that are here in person, we do have some victuals and inebriants that we can enjoy over here. Those that are online, yes, we will enjoy those on your behalf as well. So I thank you on behalf of the University of the Witwatersrand and the South African Institute of Electrical Engineers. We bid you good evening. Thank you.